Most problems on the career ladder never start with a poor performance review. They start during a coffee break after a morning meeting. You've caught a moment alone with your manager, the atmosphere is relaxed, the conversation flows, and you say something. A small thing. Maybe that you're thinking about having a child. Maybe that you bought a house that month and are going through a tough time because of it. Maybe that the latest project really wore you out. Your tone is sincere, your intentions are pure, and your manager seems so understanding as they listen that the thought of regretting what you said doesn't even cross your mind. Then time passes. It's time for promotions, but you don't get an offer in that round. A major project is assigned, but you're not on the list. Opportunities quietly slip away right before your eyes, going to other people. And you can't figure out what you did wrong because what you did wrong were just two sentences you said during that coffee break, and you never made the connection between them. I'm Stefan. On this channel, we talk about how careers really work, not the sugar-coated version you're given on your first day. Today, I'll discuss the 7 categories of information that should never fall into a manager's hands. However, to understand why this is so important, we first need to focus on a reality that most people overlook. The reality of your relationship with your manager. The warmth you feel isn't fake. There are moments when they genuinely care about you, and that care can be sincere. But that same manager is part of a system that makes decisions about you every day. They think about which project goes to whom, whose path will be cleared, and who will write those 2 paragraphs. And when they engage in this thinking, they use not just your work, but everything they know about you. Because that's how the human brain works. Once a piece of information enters the system, it is impossible to restore it to its state before it entered. It cannot be abstracted from the decision-making process. Even in the moments when they want to be honest with you, that information remains there, quietly coloring everything. This doesn't make them a bad person, it simply makes them human. But when it comes to career matters, this mechanism becomes crucial because the cost is borne solely by one side. Now let's move on to those 7 categories. First, anything related to your plans to leave the workforce or scale back your commitment. You're thinking about starting a family, building a side project, planning to move to a different city, or simply wanting to live at a different pace within the next 5 years. Sharing this with your manager feels natural because it's only human. It's nice to give advance notice, but consider this. As a manager, you have 2 candidates for that key role, and you know this about one of them. Circumstances could change within 3 years. Who would you choose for that role? No ulterior motives are needed in this calculation. Only the available information is processed, and the information you've shared leaves you out of the running. Second, details about your financial situation. This is the category people underestimate the most because the individual pieces of information seem harmless on their own. You mentioned that you bought a house. You mentioned that your partner lost their job. You mentioned how much daycare costs. When viewed together, these pieces form a picture showing just how limited your financial flexibility is. And this picture comes into play during salary negotiations. When you ask for a raise, your manager unconsciously recalls that picture. When you refuse a task you don't like, that picture comes to mind. When you imply you might leave, you're priced as if you actually can't leave. Trying to negotiate without the leverage you have is like competing while carrying extra weight. Third, ongoing health issues, particularly chronic conditions or mental health concerns. It's difficult to talk honestly about this topic because such explanations are almost always made with good intentions, and your manager may genuinely want to offer support. But the fact that this intention is sincere doesn't change how the information will be processed. Once your manager knows about this situation, they'll filter everything about you through that lens. When you look tired, they see a symptom. When you step back, they interpret it as a flare-up. They'll record an ordinary bad day as a cause for concern. In the short term, they might act more understanding, but in the long term, they'll quietly recalculate how reliable they'll find you over the next 5 years. And that calculation, never explicitly linked to health, translates into career decisions. Protected categories shield against overt discrimination, not against the slow shift in how someone perceives you. Fourth, conflicts in your personal life. A divorce, a custody battle, tension with a family member, an unhealed wound. Your desire to share this is usually a way of seeking support while going through a difficult time, and a good manager might encourage you to do so, but once your manager sees you as someone going through a rough patch, that image lingers far longer than that specific period in your life. People going through a rough patch aren't given tasks that require a steady hand. They aren't considered worthy of promotions that demand standing firm under pressure, and none of what you've shared comes up when these decisions are explained. Fifth, the details of your personal life and relationships outside of work. Who you spend time with, who you spend your weekends with, tensions within your friend group, and your experiences with your roommate. These details start to surface during breaks or casual moments, because in those moments, you're speaking not just as an employee, but as a person, and that's natural. But once these details enter the picture, they stay there. It's unfair for what happens outside of work hours to shape your evaluation during work hours, but the human mind isn't compartmentalized, it has a holistic structure. Sixth, details of their career history, especially turning points that didn't end well. Most people explain how they ended up here, and honest people do so with healthy candor. The previous job was a bad experience. The manager before that was a disaster. A company was toxic. There was no exit plan. These are the kinds of confessions that feel like they're building trust, but they create a pattern in the manager's mind. When something challenging happens in the current job, the manager tends to read it as a continuation of that hidden narrative. You quietly start to be seen as someone who has had problems before. The seventh and most systematic source of damage is any expression of dissatisfaction with your current job. A small comment. You're tired. The project workload is heavy. Things aren't going in the right direction. Saying this feels like a natural expression of honesty, but every expression of dissatisfaction is recorded as a data point regarding your commitment. As these data points accumulate, the manager begins to position themselves for your potential departure. They transfer your knowledge to other departments. You sense a defensive stance in the way they manage you, but you can't pinpoint where it's coming from. And this shift has already begun even before you've seriously considered leaving. The mechanism at work in all 7 of these categories is the same. The moment you share a piece of personal information, it becomes part of the image the manager holds of you. That image quietly shapes decisions made in rooms you've never seen. When those decisions are announced, they're explained in an entirely different language, better timing, a better profile, a better match. But the real input was that, and the damage occurs in the gap between these two things. In a way that is invisible and untraceable. It's also worth noting, what protects you isn't being cold or evasive. It's keeping clear in your own mind what belongs to the work relationship and what doesn't. Work-related information can be shared. Professional preferences, your career goals tied to this company, honest feedback on the projects you're working on. It would be odd to withhold these. Personal information, however, is different. Your future plans, financial situation, health, relationships, past, and grievances. None of these need to be part of your manager's working model of you. Keeping these to yourself isn't deceit, it's common sense. And common sense is one of the least appreciated skills in any career. There's another related skill, perhaps a more subtle art, which is knowing what to do when your manager seeks personal insights from you. Good managers do this intentionally because it builds trust. They might ask, "How was your weekend? Is everything okay with your family?" Or, "How are you feeling?" These questions are usually not traps, but the way you answer matters. You can say, "It was great." You don't have to explain what you did. You can say, "I'm fine." You don't have to explain why. Once these conversations are over, list out exactly what you said, and you'll see it's much shorter. That's the essence of that skill, and it's worth practicing. Those who do it best do it without thinking. They come across as warm and engaged. They seem like real people. But the list of what they actually say is much shorter than you'd expect. This balance is about being both approachable and guarded. And achieving that balance, especially in a good conversation, doesn't come naturally without deliberate practice. When a manager wants to get personal information from you, feels connected to you, or wants to build trust, that's the most dangerous moment. Because in that moment, being open feels both natural and rewarding. Being deliberate, on the other hand, feels a bit odd, a bit cold, but that oddness is temporary. The cost of that openness, however, lasts much longer. Let me tell you something. This completely changes the whole picture. Not sharing personal information is almost always far less costly than sharing it. At worst, not sharing this information might make you appear a bit more distant and reserved to your manager. This is a risk with clear boundaries. On the other hand, sharing is a risk with no boundaries. Once information is out in the open, it becomes part of a system you can no longer control. This information is used in ways you can't foresee and can shape the course of your career for years to come. The asymmetry is enormous. And people choose the high cost in those moments because being open is easier than being cautious. The bill comes much later. Where you draw the line is up to you. Some draw it tight, some draw it loose. There is no single right way. But I can say this, Most people draw that line far too loosely, and they pay the price when the cumulative weight of small disclosures transforms their careers into something that no longer looks like the result of a single choice. The discipline of restraint is unassuming. It won't make you captivating in the moment, but what it protects is this: your chance to be evaluated based on what you actually do in an environment where the manager's impression of you is built from the traces of your work. So be genuine, be present, be human. But underlying all of this, pay a little closer attention to these 7 categories. And don't let the warmth of a good conversation tempt you to abandon a discipline that pays off in minutes rather than years. If this has given you a sharper perspective on your own career path, let me tell you this before you subscribe. On this channel, we discuss exactly these kinds of things every week. Practical insights you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next video, now is the time.